So, this is, I guess, part two. I think as I was driving, I was thinking about a lot of memories I have not thought about in a long time. And one thing I think we forget to remember as people or kids coming from a hard place is that there was good times in all that darkness. And I think after the fact, it's easy for the negative, the trauma, to overshadow those lights in the dark places. And at the time, you're not thinking much about it because you're so obsessed with what is going on with you, the stacking and repetitive trauma. So I think as I progress from this point, because the beginning there was a substantial amount of dark in the first little bit of the abuse going to Hawaii and then being taken. And as my life went on and things happened, I realized as I was remembering things I thought I forgot about that a lot of the trauma that progressed and abuse that happened at like throughout the rest of my childhood, a lot of it in my own mind was made extreme because of stacking trauma. I think, unfortunately, as adults, especially ones that want to take up a child to help a kid that comes from a dark place, because of lack of understanding, not because of ill intentions, I think lack of understanding, they end up, or we end up, inadvertently creating the trauma to be worse. And forgetting that when you're dealing with a child that has had things happen to them, that what you may see as not that bad of corporal punishment, and you allow your anger to take hold of you and things to get worse, because we're human, that when this kid reacts normally, a lot of it has nothing to do with what is going on in the place, but more so what has happened. And as it progresses, this stacks, the trauma stacks, and it's harder to find that understanding. So let's get into this before I go too deep into all that. I just wanted to kind of say that, there's light in all those dark places I'm remembering. So where I left off was I got taken, and now at this point, I'm in a psych ward. So from that psych ward, they ended up moving me to a foster home in Kailua. I was with this lady named Tracy. It was a two-story house. She was an artist. It was several other kids that were there that she was trying to adopt. She had a big pool, several teenagers. Overall, in retrospect, when I was remembering it, it was a good home. And I was a confused kid at the time that had all these crazy things happen in such a short period of time that through anger and not knowing what these emotions are or how to deal with them, I end up lashing out and being extremely angry. So, through those situations and many in this home, it created escalation of abuse that maybe other kids weren't dealing with. So, I remember when I got to Tracy's, I was in a top room with a kid named Sebastian. I was 7 years old, and I wet the bed for a long time through my childhood because of trauma. And I don't know if it's from that first night in that transition foster home whenever I wet myself in the corner. I remember there was a lot of psychological as well as physical abuse. So her way of punishing me, because she, like we said, with getting angry, she tried meditation groups, things like that, for all the kids, and with me it didn't work. I had these moments of being angry, and she used to pick me up by my arm and drag me through the house and just beat me off of each wall, swing me kind of like a pendulum, and then toss me into my room. Easier solution when you get angry. But there was that, the abuse that happened at home. I don't know, a lot of psychological. They used to. I didn't have many friends at the beginning. I don't know if Sebastian saw me as a threat or as a new kid moving into a home, because that happened a lot. But they would make me take my urine filled pull ups and walk out to the curb every day in front of all my friends. So everybody in the neighborhood knew that I wet myself. I remember at the time, being the 7-year-old kid, I didn't. It was hard for me to have friends. My mind was still, going through all these things that just happened, being taken, all the abuse with, not being with my family or my sisters. And I remember walking around the neighborhoods, and I used to do this thing when I was by myself where I used to sing to God. I used to sing to Him and ask Him why. And for a long time, I did this until some other kids heard me singing to God, asking Him why all these things. And they used to chase me and laugh and make fun of it. I remember there was older boys in the home. They're normal teenagers. They're this top bunk room and this house in the back. And they used to play paintball and use us kids as kind of like target practice, take us into the woods. And I'm not strong enough to pull back a pump paintball gun at the time. And they used to just light us up with this paintball. And Tracy tolerated us playing until I started going up to these boys in the top part of their little bunkhouse and asking them just to shoot me with the paintball gun. And as I've thought about it, I don't know if it was because I wanted the pain or if I wanted the attention. But I remember those same boys used to get sport out of me and Sebastian, which kind of fed that rivalry between us. They used to take us. Tracy had this upstairs with this open area, and then this kind of like down, kind of like lowered area to where you could sit, and we used to all play games and stuff. And they used to take me and Sebastian, two of the boys, in each corner. Say like, he's gonna do this to your mom. He's gonna do this. He's gonna do this. This is how you swing. And they would let us at each other. And I remember at one point I ended up hitting Sebastian's nose and breaking it. Well, I ended up getting tossed around, dragged into my room, and beat for doing this. I remember at one point running from Tracy, and in that back like kind of bunkhouse that I was talking about, there was a place underneath of it. And as I was going over these memories, I realized the similarities from when I hid underneath that house to where when I hid from my mom in the school before I got taken. And I remember screaming at Tracy, just trying to get underneath there and grab me and pull me out and reassure me it's okay. And I remember just losing my mind. And once again, that fear and that frustration of not being able to get this kid or help this kid end up escalating. So it went from a good home with a pool everything nice to progressively more abuse towards me. I remember after I ended up breaking Sebastian's nose with the fighting, the older boys ended up getting taken from that foster home, which made Sebastian just, resent me that much more. So I remember at one point I had some friends over and he used to toss like my fucking pull-ups down, soaked in urine, just to make fun of me. But the reason why I ended up getting taken from this home is there's an 80-year-old lady, and she used to walk up the stairs, or she started walking up the stairs to grab me. I can't remember what was going on. I was at the top of the stairs. She grabbed me by the wrist. She grabbed me by the wrist. I pulled off and pushed her. She fell down the steps, broke her hip, died in the hospital, but she couldn't eat. So they ended up moving me foster homes because of this, because they accused me of killing this lady at 7 years old. Because when she went to go grab my hand or wrist in the middle of the night to go swing me up against the wall again, I end up blacking out. I guess the foster care report, or what I told them, was I saw myself from a distance as if I was standing in a corner. So they moved me to another foster home, and I ended up moving to this foster home in Kailua. Really love this foster home. There was downsides to it, I'm 7 years old. I think I was there for 7, and I remember my 8th birthday there. And it was great. I was sleeping on the back porch with this other boy in this area with a bunch of car parts, and I had kind of a bed tucked in the corner. And I remember, like I said, I still wet the bed for a long time, so I would hide my clothes underneath my bed because I was ashamed of them. So I would smell like urine. And anytime I went to school, um, which that in between, I ended up finding a flare gun and a boat up front and a bunch of flares and took him to school because I was afraid my stepdad was going to find me and kill me. But this home, it was like I was in a Metro Bowling League. I played like Mobile Suit Gundam game in the back on the Dreamcast with this teenage kid, playing the ukulele with him or listening to him play it. I was, 7, 8 years old. I remember at 7, 8, if I didn't cook my own food, except for dinner, I wasn't, like, they wouldn't cook you anything, so I didn't eat. So, breakfast and lunch, I usually didn't eat food. I remember the one times that they would cook breakfast is like when I'd wake up in the morning, I'd smell breakfast, is it was time to clean the house. And that was kind of my, oh, it's time to clean. We're going to cook for you today. But as a kid, I had these two friends, and they had their mom, and I'd go over to their house. They're down the road from me, and she'd end up cooking me breakfast or lunch, and I'd go over there so I could actually eat. And we used to go down to the fountain, and I remember digging in the fountain at Kailua Park and getting all the change. Back when Spam Musubi's at 7-Eleven was still $1, we'd go down there and get a bunch of Spam Musubi's just to eat. And at the time, I kind of went from singing to God and asking Him why to trying to, and in doing all this, I'm trying to, as a kid, trying to make sense of everything, of why it's happening. And I think even in normal day, God is a good place to find that hope. And I had this idea at 7, 8 years old that we were this painting, because Tracy was a painter, so that kind of followed me over. And God would make mistakes on us. So as he was making this painting, he would make mistakes. And I was okay with the mistakes, because by the end of it, after all those mistakes, it would turn out to be a perfect painting. That nothing is made. Nothing beautiful comes without error. So I remember telling my friend's mom this. But, that foster home overall, like I wanted to be adopted by them. If like and you know overall sleeping on the back porch, going to school in urine soaked clothes, not being fed, breakfast or lunch unless you cooked it at, 7, 8 years old. It was not that bad in my eyes as a kid, you know. But the flare gun taking it to school was kind of the end straw of it. And they end up taking me from the home, and people complaining about me smelling like urine because they didn't wash my clothes. Um, what else can I say about this home? Well, at the time, they're trying to figure out medication for me. So I remember them putting me and overhearing the counselor or the psychologist telling the foster parents that this is a test medication we're going to put them on. It's still in trial areas or trial testing, but we're going to put them on it just to see if it helps them with focusing. And I remember having to go in twice a week to get my blood drawn because it's still in test stages. So they have to make sure it's not messing up my system to see what it's doing to me. So it's basically a lab rat. So twice a week, I would go in. They would test my system to see how this drug was affecting me. And hold on, there's a bike in here. Hello. But as I went on, I remember the foster parents making a good call. It got to a point where because it was a focus medication in test stages, that I'd be so focused on one thing that they'd be yelling and screaming at me, trying to get my attention, walking in front of me, and I wouldn't hear them. And I remember looking up, and they would be like, "We've been trying to call you for like over an hour. Like, are you okay, Andrew?" And they end up getting me taken off of this medication because it, it it was so strong that like anything I'd focus on, I was no longer there. Um, so they ended up moving me from this foster home after I took this flare gun to school. I remember it being really hard on me because once again I was moving, and this time I actually enjoyed this foster home and it was good for me. At least I thought at the time. So they ended up moving me from Kailua to Ewa Beach. Now when I moved to the Ewa Beach foster home, this one was a white military gentleman with a Filipino wife. And there was their son and another foster care kid. I remember, I'm 8 years old at the time, wanting to try deodorant. We see a deodorant to kind of like fit in. I remember, like, you know, 8 years old, these foster parents wanted the perfect kid to adopt. So, they rode dirt bikes and went surfing and all these things. First time I tried riding a dirt bike, I fell over. So they wouldn't let me touch it again. And then from there, it just kind of put this negative mind state or negative image into the foster gentleman about me not being the perfect kid, not who they want. So the whole time to that foster home, they used to race dirt bikes. I was left on the side, so I remember running underneath of all these the bleachers, just watching and cheering from underneath of them and climbing around them as the other foster care kid and their son raced in the dirt bike track. So I just run around it and cheer from them from a distance because they didn't want me really involved. I wasn't good at riding, and I remember them taking me to go surfing with them. But they're like, "Oh, we'll be right back for you." And they left me on the beach. And I remember sitting there so hopeful all day, just waiting for them to come back for me, waiting to be a part of it. And it ended up getting to the sunset before they finally came back. And they didn't want to take me surfing. They just told me that to keep me complacent, waiting on the beach. And I remember through the whole time being there that their kid used to tell me all the time how mommy and daddy don't like you. They're going to send you back to where you came from and we're going to get another boy. And I would hear this so much throughout the entirety of the time being there in the foster care or that foster home, is how the mom and dad didn't want me, how they gonna send me back, how they wanted a boy that was better. And when you're a kid, that starts eating at you. Especially when you finally do end up getting moved. So they ended up taking me from that foster home, not because of abuse, not because of anything like that. It was because I wasn't good enough. It was because as a kid, I wasn't what they wanted. No matter how hard I tried in that foster home, no matter how hard I tried to be the perfect kid, I just wasn't what they wanted. So from that foster home, there's a lot more psychological issues that came out of it. I was left alone a lot. I was told how I wasn't good enough. I was promised things and lied to about them. And eventually end up getting moved because I wasn't good enough at the time. So I spent a long time with, battling with that part of it. Well, they moved me to another foster home. This one was Jonathan. He was in Mililani. He's kind of a weird guy. He worked on his computer all the time, played games. I went to like a Mormon church, and I Boy Scouts, all that fun stuff. They had to rush me through. And I think I'm like 9 at the time, and this was the longest foster home I was in. So I was in this foster home, and I ended up staying, and it was kind of interesting. Being 9 years old to 10 in this foster home, it was kind of a weird fat guy with bald head. And he used to like ask me and the other kid in the foster home to show us our genitals to see if we had foreskins or not. He used to end up putting Jerry Springer Too Hot for TV on the TV and had us watching adult films. And we weren't allowed to leave the house. Wasn't allowed to have friends. I remember going across the apartments. We're in these big apartment complexes. And I remember going across the apartment one time after school, would go hang out with a friend, and him losing his mind on me. There was kind of a problems in school because I was the white kid, of course, and I can't remember what created the problem with this other boy. But I remember for days afterwards, or weeks of it, I would get off the school bus and me and this kid, there's like a bathroom by the bus stop, and we'd just sit on the ground and just beat the shit out of each other. We'd roll back and forth, just pounding each other's faces. And I eventually got so tired of just fighting all the time that I realized I was faster than him. So I ended up telling him, if you can catch me, I can fight you, or I'll fight you again. So I spent the rest of my time in that foster home, every day after the school bus, just running as fast as I can to get away from this kid. And Jonathan was my last foster home that I was in Hawaii before my family kind of came to get us. But there was other sides with him to where like I said, I was a very angry kid and I had all this trauma I didn't understand. So I when I would get angry, he used to hold me on the ground and tell me how there's a little demon in you. There's a demon in you. There's a demon in you. You have a demon in you. And then he would shut off all the power on the breaker box and leave me in the house by myself. And I remember after this happening a couple of times, I finally ran away. I just left. I ended up leaving, and I remember sitting in, like, after walking for, I don't even know how long, I was 9, 10 years old, and sitting in front of this karate place in this big parking lot, and just walking back and forth, not knowing what to do with myself, just being scared, being upset, not wanting to go back, but not knowing where to go. And I ended up finally going back. Jonathan was there. I can't remember exactly what happened because I left. And anyways, my family ended up coming to the islands after Hawaii. Like the Epi Purcell pulled me, my two sisters from their foster homes, and ended up pulling us in, opening up this shoebox. And had all these letters from my family. So the whole time from 7 years old to 10, I had no idea my family wanted anything to do with me. I had no Christmas presents from them, no word from them. So in my mind, I just got left there. And we're reading through all these letters, and they tell us in a week our family's coming to take us away from the islands. And so my family came. It was my dad, my uncle, well, uncle-in-law, Sean, that's a whole nother story, and my dad and my auntie. And they came and we explored the island. I remember it being so great. Some of the only pictures I have of my childhood at that time was with my family that they took when they came to the islands to pick us up. And I remember in one of them I did this. I didn't like, because I remember in my mind, it wasn't shock, it was in my mind, I wasn't going back with them. This couldn't be happening. All these things that happened couldn't just be coming to an end. And so in my mind I was like, call me, to the rest of my family. And well, we end up leaving the islands and going with them. This is what I'm going to leave it at for this one for today. Just leaving the islands and coming back to the mainland with them. I want to go back to what I was saying. There's good in all these homes. I remember, even though in Tracy's where I ran away when I was a kid because of all these things and running through the woods, like scared and trying to be away from there. I remember having friends that had a skate park in the house. I remember times of going over to one of my friends' house, and we used to always play 007. And then I remember, in the following foster home with, I had friends that, because I was allowed to come back as long as it was still light. I could go wherever I wanted to go. I had friends that took me out to my first luau, and I ended up messing that up because I didn't tell them that I was going to stay overnight. And almost killed their dad in a go-kart, but so I had friends at the time. What ended up stacking up after a period of time is not keeping those friends, not being able to have them for long, being left alone, being moved consistently, having nothing in my life that was consistent. But at the same time, there's still light points in it. I remember playing tag as a kid when I was at Tracy's with all the neighborhood kids. I remember rollerblading. I I remember, playing games in the foster home that was less than ideal with the gentleman and his kid, to where they're riding dirt bikes. But I still got to ride dirt bikes. I still got to experience those things as a kid. I was in a bowling league in the foster home with the flare gun in Kailua, so, and some of these things still transition over. So I think it's easy for us to focus on all the negative, all the bad things that happen. And I didn't want to do that with this video because yes, there's bad, you know, but there's good in it. There's good memories, and I think accepting some of the bad, letting it go, and then at the same time being able to appreciate the light and focus on those good points in it, because the bad is just a lesson. It's like anything in life. You may have a hard situation, a hard time, but it's just a lesson. That's all it is. It's how you look at it. I can have something not go my way and either let it consume me, let it control me, or I can take it as a lesson and focus on the good. Light will always shine through. Can't have rain, no rainbow without no rain. But anyways, I'll continue the story about how it was whenever I got back from the islands for the first time, with my family, and then what kind of put me back on the islands. So, appreciate you listening. Not as hard this time as it was before, you know. Till next time.